The Pomegranate Theatre, formerly the Civic and before that the Corporation Theatre, was built as part of the Stevenson Memorial Hall in 1879. Its external appearance has changed a little since then. The main entrance was moved from a central position under the great window to its location under the canopy, and the stage house and dressing room block that fronts Corporation Street was added during a major refit in 1897. The internal layout of the foyer and bar has changed substantially over the years. The bar originally contained the caretaker's lodgings. The spaces occupied by the merchandising sales point and the bar alcove were originally the caretaker's bedroom and parlour, while the ladies' toilet was once his kitchen. The rest of the bar area was set aside for storage and services. The caretaker's lodgings were accessed from a small door where the main entrance most recently was. This was all swept away by a 1910 rebuild that saw a house built for the caretaker and his former lodgings replaced by the bar cellar and toilet accommodation. The foyer has undergone many changes. Additional entrances and exits have been installed and stairs to the circle built and dismantled over time. The old main entrance used to be directly opposite the entrance to the stalls, but was moved, perhaps to mitigate against drafts blowing straight in off the street, and the space converted into a tiny box office and suite counter. Most recently, the whole of the old main entrance was used as a box office. A ladies' retiring room was built where a staircase once came down from the circle. This later became an office, and by the time of the 2022 closure, it was an adapted toilet paid for by the theatre friends. The room next to it was the duty manager's office. These steps to the circle are not original, but they do sit more or less where the original ones were. The original ones were cramped and dangerous and were replaced with this set in 1890 when work was carried out to improve access and egress. An additional set of stairs was added that went down on the opposite side of the old main entrance, giving the whole arrangement a tidy, symmetrical look. Stained glass windows feature prominently in the circle area. The Great Window was installed in 1879 and features an image of George Stephenson in its centre panel. Panels to the left and right of this held images of the crests of the Chesterfield and Derbyshire councils, but only the Chesterfield one remains visible. The window arrangement seen around the circle bar was installed in 1910 as part of a screen to stop drafts and was duplicated on the other side. The stairs to the circle rose between them after turning a corner at the bottom of the Great Window. The door to the circle used to be central to this arrangement, but was moved slightly to the left when the circle foyer and bar were created in 1980. Let's go into the auditorium. The original door to the stalls was just to the right of this one, where the alcove is. The auditorium was originally flat, with one entrance and exit and a shallow platform stage at one end. It was plain. Almost all of the detailed plasterwork around the proscenium and circle front were later additions. Successive alterations saw the building of the stage house in 1897-8 and the erection of a raked floor on top of the original one in 1910, so that it gained 4 feet in height at the back of the space to improve the view from the seats. The orchestra pit was sunk at this time too, and fixed seating was installed throughout the stalls, lowering the capacity there from around 1,000 to around 400. The centre aisle was a later addition, as was a lighting control room added at the back in the 1960s by the removal of 3 rows of seats. Most recently, a passage was cut through from the back wall to allow access to the museum's toilets, doubling the provision of such facilities for theatre patrons. In a series of major works during 1990, the entire ceiling was removed and remade, while the roof was completely replaced. These wooden buttresses were replaced. For years the ceiling had been underpinned by a gauze cloth that was there to catch any plaster or paintwork that might fall or peel off. A lighting bridge was installed during the same round of enhancements, vastly improving the provision of front-of-house lighting. A number of earlier features survived until the 2022 closure if you knew where to look for them. You can see the former entrance to the circle, and from the street you can appreciate that the corrugated sheeting installed inside to help the blackout covered windows made partly of stained glass. Stained glass panels were included in doors, as seen here at the back of the circle fire exit, and 1 or 2 redundant gas lights used for emergency lighting survived successive redecorations in the fire exits. The proscenium arch was an 1897 addition. For years, the shield in the centre had remained plain, but craftsmen from the council's staff created a replica of the borough's old coat of arms to occupy the space during the 1990 refurbishment. Here is a stage door area and the booth where the stage doorkeeper would have sat. Windows opened onto the corridor for artists to collect messages and dressing room keys. In later years, this became a backstage phone box. These dressing rooms at the Pomegranate Theatre have changed little since the 1960s. Subsidence associated with the building of the Great Central Railway caused windows to fit poorly. They were difficult to heat and offered nothing in the way of home comforts to visiting companies. Most recently a laundry room, this was once the rewinding room for the Corporation Cinema's back projection equipment. This lobby was once the kitchen for the caretaker's house, built in 1910 when the addition of a theatre bar claimed his old quarters front of house. The theatre's workshop and technical store was originally the artistes' retiring rooms prior to the 1897 rebuild. The alcove was originally a doorway that gave access to the platform stage. Built in 1897, the caretaker's house offered a substantial upgrade on his old accommodation. It had 4 bedrooms, a kitchen, a parlour and a sitting room, and an indoor bathroom and toilet. When the Rep began in 1947, it provided lodgings for performers before becoming a furniture and costume store. The area under the stage would once have housed trapdoors, but was used for storage of scenery, as well as being the scenic carpenter's workshop. A door in the proscenium wall led to the orchestra pit, while a production manager's office was built in one corner. The Great Central Railway was forced to compensate the council when their tunnelling work damaged the building, and the concrete and brick rafts at the rear of this area may be a relic of repair work designed to broaden the back wall's foundations. When the March of Progress added electronic dimming for theatre lighting in the 1990s, part of the understage area was partitioned off for use as a dimmer room. The bell ringing practice at the nearby parish church was probably the greatest surprise that met visiting performers. It usually started at 7:30, just as the curtain rose on the start of the show. The back projection box in the centre of the stage's back wall was knocked down in 1990 to leave a useful storage alcove. In recent years, cinema was refitted to the building. The screen was permanently rigged next to the house curtain and was raised and lowered on an electric winch. Digital projection came from a box on the back wall of the circle. Installed in 1980, the house curtain was raised and lowered on a counterweighted system operated from the prompt corner. In theory, the curtain and the counterweights are of a similar weight so that the operator can easily move the whole mechanism one way or another. The iron, or safety curtain, was on counterweights too. It took around 20 seconds to drop the 26 feet to the stage floor, and along with its accompanying water drencher, would protect the public against fire for far longer than it would take to evacuate the building. Originally lifted by a hand winch on the stage left fly floor, an electric motor for this was installed around 1990. The stage left fly floor housed electrical patch panels for on-stage and front-of-house lighting, as well as the winches for lighting bars, seen here fixed to the wall, and the safety curtain. The electric lighting winches were a later addition paid for by the theatre friends to replace ageing hand winches once fixed to the wooden fly rail itself. The view of the stage from the stage left fly rail shows the comparatively shallow wings that made masking a challenge. The sole entrance to the stage from the dressing rooms was in the middle of the stage left wall. This catwalk between the fly floors was not for those of a nervous disposition, but was the only access to the stage right fly floor after the ladder on that side was taken out of use. Looking over at the stage from the stage right fly rail, it is possible to appreciate the rake of 1 in 24 that dropped from upstage at the back to downstage at the front. The scenery get-in from station back lane is in the centre of the wall below. Looking up towards the grid, you can see the ropes and bars that comprised the hemp flying system. Ropes tied to aluminium bars were run up and over pulleys in the grid and down to the stage right fly floor, where they were tied off onto metal cleats bolted to the fly rail. The system put a certain physical demand on the flymen, who weren't always men, but when properly looked after, it was perfectly safe in the right hands and offered problem-solving options that wouldn't always have been present with other systems. The wooden roof structure was original to the 1897-8 construction of the stage house. This wooden staircase went from the fly floor to the grid and was a scary thing to go up and down even after the addition of a second handrail. For years, a tradition among people working aloft saw them add their names to the underside of the staircase in chalk. At the time of closure in 2022, some surviving names and dates went back to the 1960s. In this view of the grid, at the very top of the building, you can see the sets of 3 ropes that ran over the pulleys on their way between the fly rail and the stage. Ropes in each set were identified by their length as a long, a middle or a short rope, and the shorts were on the same stage right side as the operating fly rail, and this distinction was important when those on stage and those on the fly floor had to coordinate the tricky process of deading a cloth hung on a bar. We hope you have enjoyed this short trip around the Pomegranate Theatre as it was at the time of its closure for renovation in June 2022. If you would like more information about the Friends of the Theatre and their work, search for Chesterfield Theatre Friends on Facebook or visit www.chesterfieldtheatrefriends.co.uk.